Hi friends, welcome to episode 53. The weather is stormy, but today is the very first day of 2025. It's the 1st of January 2025, so a whole new year. Interestingly, I thought this time last year I'd have been a lot further advanced with this. It takes forever. So I do apologise if you had to put through almost a year of these, seeing very little progress. But anyway, at the end of last year, December, a lot has been achieved. We've made or dry made the ceiling. I've got the lighting working inside the bus, so there's only a little bit more electrical work to do on it. And today I've come up to have a look at the painting that I did on Sunday. I'm hoping it's going to be dried. As I say, it's not freezing cold. It's about 11 degrees here at the moment, so that's probably helped the paint dry out a little bit. But fingers and toes crossed, I might spend part of today putting some of the front of the bus, some of the little bits of beading and stuff. I need to keep the area where the fuel pump is and all of that. I need to keep that clear because we're going to have to do a bit more work on that. And I'll give a little update on the injectors later on, because I sent the injectors away day before yesterday, and I got a report back on the state of those injectors. So I'll do an update later on around the engine. Anyway, so I'm going to push on. I'll start with a cup of coffee first, I think, but I will push on, and we'll see how much we get done on the very first day of 2025. Not bad. But it's picked up some dust while it's been drying. It's not fully dry yet, so I'm going to need to put another coat on it to try and get rid of that dust. Then at that point my recording thing went flat, but hey, never mind. Right, so yeah, it was still tacky, and when I asked my friend Mark Davis from the other side, the owner of RM158, to come over and give me a hand shifting the bonnet over, I was wearing gloves and he got absolutely covered in green. So poor old Mark. But yeah, the paint is not dry. It was still it was surface dry, but not sufficient to work on it. So I'm going to have to leave it probably a little bit so it's dry out. And now, of course, it's really freezing cold. So, and I really do want to put another coat on it before I start putting all that stuff back. So we're going to put this one now on the back boiler. Let's move on to the engine, shall we? Right, when I had the front of the bus off, I thought it was logical that I did the injectors. So popped the injectors out about 3 weeks ago, and last week dropped them down to this chap who's based in Croxley. Rather cramped site, I must admit, but an absolute mine of knowledge. He's done work for us in the past. Over the last 25 years, he's done bits and pieces, and I think on some Rootmaster injectors as well, going back. So he really knows his stuff. Anyway, I took these 6 injectors in, and I was hoping that he would say, oh, I just need to give him a bit of a service. But 24 hours later, he was back on the phone and said, it's a bit of a disaster story. Right, so perhaps I'd best explain what the injectors do. Now, the injectors are part of the fuel system. And if you have a petrol car, you have spark plugs. But on a diesel vehicle, you have injectors, and that's basically what these do. So these fire diesel into the cylinder, and then the diesel ignites on compression. Now, those little nozzles at the bottom, you can see, look like little pins. What they do is they atomize the fuel, which makes it burn better. Yeah, you can often tell if you've got bad injectors because the bus can run badly or smoke or whatever. So yeah, now when I parked this in the barn, these injectors were absolutely fine. There was nothing wrong with them whatsoever. And I had them out probably about 2 or 3 years before we parked it in the barn. So they haven't been looked at for, I don't know, 35, 36 years. But they certainly were looked at donkey's years ago. But they've just sat. And sitting is not good. So like I said, Dave is an absolute mine of information, and this kind of stuff's quite simple to him because he works on very modern vehicles. But he took one look at it and he said, where's your washers? And he pulled off 3 washers. Now, I didn't know, but at the bottom there, just before the nozzle, there's supposed to be a washer. So in there was about 3 of those washers. He's removed them for this picture. But if you have a look at those little rubber sort of donut things, they're they stop it chuffing. And I said to him, I said, I want them back though, so it stops it chuffing. And he said, well, it shouldn't chuff, because if your washers were there, it would be perfectly fine. So there wouldn't be any need for these. Anyway, mysterious, I thought. Luckily, yeah, so we got 3 off. And that meant I then had a mission when I went back down the barn a couple of days later to try and fish the remaining washers out. So anyway, back to this. Yeah, a total disaster story, unfortunately. So, right, the 3 of them are completely cream crackered. There's no fuel is passing through them whatsoever. One of them is atomizing, but softly. So in other words, it's not working properly. But, you know, you could say it might just about be working, but no good. And the other 2 are hosing neat fuel into the cylinder, or at least they would if they were allowed to. They obviously haven't because the bus engine's not been running. And in Dave's view, the guy that runs this place, the bus would never have started. Obviously, it would, you know, if it could have started, it would have sounded really rough. So with 3 of those injectors not working at all, only one partly, and the other 2 just showering neat fuel into the cylinder. Now, showering neat fuel into a cylinder on a modern bus is actually quite disastrous, because what it does is it actually burns the cylinder out, and you end up with expensive engine repairs. Quite often, sometimes you're having to replace the entire engine. Now, obviously, I can't take a chance with this. He also had a chat with me about, you know, some other things that I'd found on it. Like we went into a detailed discussion about oil, and the oil that came out of it some time back was quite what there's a term in paint called fixotropic, which is non-drip. The first bit when that oil came out previously was non-drip. It just came out like ice cream. It was really weird, and I assume it's because the fact that it's solidified towards the bottom, all the sediment has settled out at the bottom of the oil. And he said, well, we chatted about it, and I said what I plan to do is to run the engine up, and hopefully, you know, the new oil would dilute with whatever the stuff that's left in the bottom of the engine. And he said, don't do that, because, you know, probably within the first 2 or 3 minutes you're going to do untold damage to the engine. So I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to take his advice. So poor old Roy Gould, who's lent me his tool for removing the sump plug, I'm going to have to go back and drain all that oil out that I put in the other day, and I'm going to take the oil strainer down, which I can get to, and clean that out, and that's at least a chance. He also suggested I had a look at the oil pump as well to see if this detritus has got into the oil pump, but I don't think it would have done because the engine's not been running. So anyway, yeah, he's going to try and find the bits to get this put back together again, so I don't know how long it's going to take. They might well be Rootmaster injectors, and I know I've got some Rootmaster injectors. If they are the same injectors and he can't fix these, I might be able to sort of pop a set of Rootmaster injectors down to him. But it's all part of the process of putting this bus back. Bearing in mind, like I said a number of times about this, I parked that bus up without any problems whatsoever. She ran beautifully, and age, sadly, sitting around, not going out and about, has done untold damage to it. And, you know, luckily this one is parked inside a barn. But can you imagine what would happen if you parked it in a field somewhere? I mean, it just wouldn't be worth restoring, frankly, after 30 years of being parked in a field. Luckily, it's been 30 years of parked inside a barn. But anyway, so I need to follow up on what this guy's done. So let's move on, shall we? Right, so based on Dave's advice, I've got to get the little sort of washers out. There was 2 of them that I found in there, so I needed to fish them out. Now that little space, that's where the injector sits, and the washers sit at the bottom of that. So I managed to fashion a bit of old blind wire to fish the 2 that I had in there out. So this is a bit of old blind. It comes in quite useful blind wire. It's the stuff that people that are into blinds would know that this is what they use to stop the blind coming off the roller, because when you roll it to the end, this is inside the blind. It actually prevents it coming out. So there's a bit of a fiddle to try and get that thing out. So anyway, working on that, I managed to fish out 2 of them, and Dave was also quite interested in what the actual size of the washers were. So anyway, yeah, so I'll leave myself doing that because it goes on forever. So right, finally having fished out the 2 remaining washers in there, Dave also suggested I tried to clean out the bottom of the bore. And what he suggested doing, because I haven't got the proper tool to do it, is to get something wooden and put a bit of emery cloth at the end. And the best I had was this production paper that my brother had happened to leave out, and I wondered what the hell I was going to do with it. So I found a use for it now. So yeah, I've fashioned that onto that bit of wood, as you can see, using that cable tie just to hold it in place, and just so I can also move it around, because the cable tie allows me to refresh it, which is what I've just done there. So I cleaned out what little detritus there was at the bottom of those the injector openings. So yeah, it's a bit cleaner, but anyway, I'm looking forward to getting those injectors back, and we'll see if it all works again. Right, so moving away from the engine, and let's get inside the bus. This is me on, I think it was Christmas Eve actually, taken by my brother, making out I was holding the ceiling panel up. But he's done a really pretty good job of doing this, but these need to come out now. Luckily, Mark was on hand, and I was able to go over and say, Mark, having got himself covered in paint, would you mind giving me a hand getting this ceiling out? So he kept giving me the old, half an hour, Dean. No, another half an hour. Maybe another half an hour. But anyway, after we'd gone out and got some food, Mark did give me a hand. What I'd actually done was I'd got most of the screws out, so the ceiling panels were being held on with the absolute bare minimum. And then with Mark doing basically what I'm doing in this picture, I removed the remaining screws, and then we've moved all the panels now to the back of the shed. So when the paint arrives, fingers and toes crossed, sometime next week, and providing the weather is not horrid, then I'll start the undercoat process, and then we'll put the top coat on and see what it looks like, and then sliver it back into the bus. Right, well, that's about it really. I can't say much more. It's a one-day update. Anyway, I'll be back up the barn this coming weekend, and unfortunately all the little school kids are back, so we'll be running our school services again next week. So I'll be back to going down there at the weekends. But the weather has now closed in. It really is very, very cold. It's quite noticeable now. Oops, that's one way of getting bits of beading down, isn't it? This beading's going to have to be painted with all the rest of it. So a little job for the future. So thanks very much for watching my my mini update of the very first day of this year. Happy New Year, everybody, and YouTube will recommend some more for you to watch as usual. So thanks very much, and ta-da.